choose to focus on. But listen, you know, we're talking about leadership at the Senate. There's also leadership of some kind, of the CAS kind. And there is, watu wanatafuta kazi bwana.
Wanatafuta.
Hakuna kazi Kenya hii. The CAS position, the court made its decision that the position, you know, was legal. There was public participation in its formation, and that obviously paved the way for exactly what we are seeing today. So the Public Service Commission put out a short list. It was a short list that was long with many names. And then, as has become typical fashion, Gashuri, in this country, a short list is elongated and becomes a long list, which is still a short list of all the people that sort of applied. So we had an initial list of people who'd been shortlisted for the CS position, which included journalists, five, right? Yeah. Former governors.
8.
Oh, were they 8?
There were
Did I not count?
9, but 4 have served 2 terms.
Oh, yes. There you go. And then there was former MPs, PSs,
former
senators, former CAS.
Yeah.
I also saw names in there of people who had actually applied for the PS position, were shortlisted, but didn't obviously make it, and are now in this list. So here we are again. I am Ajina, Jamila.
No,
who's in this long, short list?
No, short, long list, Gashuri has it here. Yeah. I can let him go into details. But for me, Yvonne, I just want to say a couple of things. One, you see, the number of jobs that are available are slowly quishing, kama ulivyosema. We already have CSs, we have PSs, we have heads of parastatals who've been appointed. Yeah. And there are those who...
Boards of those parastatals.
Parastatals. And there are those who've been really waiting for these CAS appointments. Of course, the delay was caused by the court order and all that. And now that it's been decided that, yes, izikazi ni halali. Remember, the CAS office was ililetwa in 2017 by President
to reward
his loyalists. Yeah. And it's actually some of those positions that are actually ni reward those who supported President Ruto when he was doing his campaigns and all that. And that's what we have seen the trend is. And it's normal that when a new administration comes in, those who actually get a slice of the national cake are those who supported the administration. And the original number of those who applied for these jobs are about 5,000. Even out of the 240, probably 30 or so are the ones who are going to end up in these positions, which means a lot of them will be left out because these are really limited slots. And then now, so those who may miss out will still wait and sit and see, well, kuna kazi ingine, maybe an ambassador here or a high commissioner here or a deputy ambassador here or a board here. But all in all, not everybody will get a position, those who supported the president and his campaigns. And I keep remembering what DP Rigathi Gachagua talked about, that those who supported the president from the word go are the ones who will be given priority. Even those who supported him after he won are going to come after hao ambao walikuwa naye tangu mwanzo Yvonne. So interviews are starting on 1st of March. And after that, we'll have the 30 or so people who will be CASs. But I have one question before I let Linus and Gashuri step in. Between the time when we had the CSs appointed and sworn in and the PSs appointed and sworn in, has there been any gap in service delivery in the ministries?
That's an interesting question.
Yeah.
That's an interesting question.
And that's a very good question to ask, especially if for a moment government was being taken as a private company, like Deputy President Gachagua says. Those are the questions that you logically ask. You say, what is the need? What is the problem that you want to fix? What is the role fit that you are looking at? So that you employ. And then what is the budget? Do you have the money to actually employ? Because this has been a very contested position, right from the days that it was brought by former President Uhuru Kenyatta. There's been an argument that, look, where does it fit? If these people are going to be in the executive, the Constitution is also very prescriptive on what constitutes the executive. There is the president, deputy president, and the cabinet. And then when you go to the Constitution, it also explains what the cabinet is. And the cabinet secretaries, it actually set the limit at 22. And I think one of the reasons the drafters of the Constitution went for that was to try and prevent wastage. But CAS, in my view, continues to be a hangover of the old days when we had assistant ministers, where you have ministers and then now you pack the ministries again with loyalists who become assistant ministers. And assistant ministers, I remember covering them in Parliament. Some of them were really, really useful. Some were some really made a career out of answering questions in the House, and they were very, very good at answering questions and representing ministers. But largely, most of their work was to represent ministers, maybe in fundraisers and other such functions. Now, we've had CAS for some time now, and if we sit here and go through who we remember from the previous list in terms of relevance in the work they did, I think credit to where it belongs, there are some of them that really used the position well, especially the Ministry of Health team. If you remember,
Dr. Mwangangi, Dr. Rashida Mann.
Dr. Rashida Mann, you know, they stood very, very clearly. But when you look at other ministries and people who you actually find in the list that they served as CASs, there is absolutely nothing memorable about what their time. And it was not their fault. It's a position whose role is not very clear because they sit between a cabinet secretary who is sometimes a technocrat. Some of them do have a political background, but mostly technocratic in their way. And then a principal secretary, that's a PS, who is the chief accounting officer in the ministry. So they sit there. I honestly, with clear conscience, wouldn't justify, but they talk of rewarding loyalists and creating their position. The arguments constitutionally have been around Article 132. You see the public service always saying that 132.4a allowed them to allows the president to create a position. But I'm not sure the Constitution was talking of such huge numbers where you basically create another
tier of government. I mean, and Gashuri, you know, like Jamila said, there are only so many, and the only precedent we have are, you know, the CSs that were appointed by Uhuru, who are how many?
29.
29. And how many were in the short list, the initial one?
Actually, the initial list had 5,000. Okay. Then it was shortlisted to 224. Then it was long-listed to 240. So, shortlist. So
if we were even to use, you know, the retired president's precedents, which was how many? 30?
29.
29. So there's, you know, well over still another 200 who won't get this job. I mean, we don't know what the president will choose to do. He may yet employ more than 30.
Well, certainly.
Or less than 30.
Maybe.
Or less than.
For now, we don't know the number that he will settle on.
Yeah.
But fact.
It won't be all.
He's not going to appoint 240 chief administrative secretaries. I even doubt he will appoint 100.
But what would stop him?
Even I would say what would probably stop 100 is the reality. The reality being, so how we have 21 ministries. You look at the Executive Order number 1 of 2023 that was published last month, January. It clearly outlines the structure of government. The Executive Office of the President that has the President, the Deputy President and Prime Cabinet Secretary, 21 ministries, and then the State Law Office that is headed by the Attorney General. That's it. So even if you were to say you will appoint at least one CAS per ministry, and for the ministries that are large, that have multiple state departments, maybe appoint 2, the same principle that was applied by President Ruto's predecessor, retired President Uhuru Kenyatta, those were 29. So 21 ministries for 29 CASs, it means some ministries had 2. So even if you were to argue the same principle applies now, at most maybe 30, 35 or 40, but I doubt it will even go
50
or that way to 40, whichever the case. So that means a whole 200 people who are in this list will miss out. Number one. Number two, this is also a question of chancing, probability. For people who love betting, they would say this is a multi-bet for some of them. Some of the names that I've seen in that list were in the list of PSs. The shortlisted and the shortlisted list and the long-listed shortlist. Sounds like a mouthful and confusing. Yeah. Some of them were also eyeing cabinet secretary positions. Some of the names that you see on that list have already been appointed into boards. Yes. So kwanza watoe jam. Yeah. So there's an elimination process that is going on even before the main elimination process by the Public Service Commission. Be it as it may, the Public Service Commission will give us a final list of these are the people that we recommend to the president to appoint as chief administrative secretaries. So a number of them will be in this list, of course, will get there. Jamila asked a very fundamental question. So what is lacking in government that they are coming to fix? One thing, which is not in governance, in the government proper, but it is in the politics proper. Number one is to reward loyalty. There are people who are told, you don't go, stick here, serikali ni kubwa. You will be accommodated somewhere. This is now part of the serikali ni kubwa, you will be accommodated somewhere. One. Two, this is also to try and answer the question, mko ndani ya serikali. Si mlitupigia kura, mko ndani ya serikali. There's always this feeling that if LK is appointed as CAS or Jamila is appointed as CAS or Yvonne, the people of Kericho, the people of Kilifi, and the people of Narok are in government. So you will see a bit of that. And thirdly, it is insurance for 2027. Si mtoto wenu wako hapa na nilimpatia kazi. So basically, the CAS positions are to try and answer the political question more than the governance question. Because, I mean, there are ministers, cabinet secretaries who are in office, there are principal secretaries who are in office, then there is the whole rank and file in government, secretaries, undersecretaries, directors, to the very lowest. So government is continuing. So these CASs, all they will need to do is to come and plug the political question, not the governance and administrative question in the administration. Yeah,
and I think as we wind up, just to note that, when you're hiring CASs, it's not just about them. They come with a personal assistant, they have a driver, they have, so there's a whole sort of ecosystem around each position. And that ecosystem comes at an expense. Of course. So, there's all of these people that must be hired. So even when we look at the value for money that we're getting, beyond just the salary of this one individual, it's to, note that there is people who will work with them and in their offices, who also, that money must come from somewhere. So if we can demonstrate that there is value for money, not just for this one individual, but for, everything else that comes with it, there's fuel expenses, there's a lot of expenses that, go into just running one office and supporting one holder of that office. If we can demonstrate there's value for money, great. If not, well,
but one time, the media, through our Royal Media Services, actually went to court to ask for the interpretation of Article 34, and the institution contemplated by Article 34 of the Constitution in terms of regulation of the media and whether that institution is the Media Council of Kenya. I'm bringing this example because sometimes down the line, maybe it will be necessary to go to the Supreme Court to seek interpretation of Article 132(4)(a) of the Constitution that reads, the President may perform any other executive function provided for in this Constitution or in the national legislation, and except otherwise provided in this Constitution, comma, may establish an office in the public service in accordance with the recommendation of the Public Service Commission. I think the country is ripe for a Supreme Court interpretation of this particular clause because, like I said earlier, what is happening now is you have the cabinet and you have CASs, which is really an extra layer. It's an entire layer that is coming into the structure that is already established by the Constitution. Is this position of CAS what was contemplated by 4A.
My simple question then, looking at the names, specifically the names, there's some ladies and gentlemen in that list, you would wonder, what are they looking for in a CAS position? Somebody who has been a governor for 2 terms, served 10 years, managed a budget of 10 billion, 12 billion, and so on and so forth. Over a period of time, let's say for 10 years, you've managed a budget of about 50, 60, 70 billion. You're looking for a CAS job, and maybe you've been in government and a PS, a director, and so on and so forth, almost 70 years old. What are you looking for in a CAS position? The initial idea was to use that position to bring up the next generation of government leaders or young public people, young leaders, right. Win them into leadership. I don't know what winning is in a 60, 70-year-old. Of course, at the risk of being
age is a number, gentlemen.
Of course, at the risk of being accused of ageism. but it defeats, for me, it defeats logic that a young, energetic, innovative young person would be competing for a CAS job.
With a governor,
former governor, a former PS, a former
provincial
who has been there, done that. I mean, I think for me it's a misnomer.
Tufunge kazi.
On that misnomer.
We start with CAS Kicker today.